Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. You know, I've said this many times during this series, miracles happen in so many forms. And if we're more intentional and we are looking for miracles, I think we see the manifestation of God's miracle working power more often than we talk about. And our guest this morning is Marie Simpson, and she has another one of those miraculous moments in life that really makes you understand the power of God. Marie is no stranger to the OPT Network, and we welcome her back. Marie, good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
So I can remember 3 to 4 years ago, 3 years ago, when you got pregnant. And nothing really unusual other than there was a 14-year gap between your pregnancies. Tell us about getting pregnant 14 years after your first child.
Okay, well, first of all, I had been praying for a long time to be able to have another kid. And I didn't know if it was actually possible because it had been so long since my first child. And so I'd been praying, my husband had been praying, my daughter had been praying since she could talk for a sibling. And unfortunately, I had suffered a couple of miscarriages along the way. And so I had prayed and become to
when
peace.
you have those miscarriages, because now we're looking, and we've always, as a media company, talked about women and their miscarriages and helping other women to understand that and to acknowledge those babies. Did having the miscarriages make you fearful about trying to have another baby or trying to get pregnant again?
I don't think so. I think, if anything, it made me hopeful and thankful that I could actually get pregnant. And then hopeful that things would be right in order for that baby to be born.
And so you have the miscarriages and you continue to pray.
I continue to pray, and I also needed to come to a place where I was content with being in God's will. My husband seemed to be, he's always been a rock. Very strong in his faith, very resilient. I don't think I've ever seen him cry, kind of thing. But I knew he wanted a baby as well. And he was just so confident that when it was God's time, that we would have a baby. And I appreciated his confidence and his faith. And I think that helped me to just realize that, okay, well, obviously my timing isn't God's. And so I need to just trust and believe that he has everything planned out in his time. And it would come to pass.
And so after the miscarriages, how long was it before you sustained pregnancy?
A year, about a year. I remember the Thanksgiving before, I found out I was pregnant in September. September I found out I was pregnant, but that previous Thanksgiving Day I had miscarried. And so it was a hurtful time. I was grieving, but also thankful for the fact that I could get pregnant. And I needed to find joy in just the fact that God still allowed my body to get pregnant and to begin with.
But it's important to know that you were only 36 years old at the time, so still really in childbearing age.
Right.
For all intents and purposes. And because women are waiting longer now.
Yes. And that's not uncommon for people to have them well into their 40s.
Right.
So I wasn't afraid about not getting pregnant at all. I think I was more concerned about if I didn't get pregnant or didn't have the baby, how my personal faith would be, how my relationship with God would be. Would I be resentful? And I was really just working on being content and happy with whatever God had in store for me.
And so fast forward a year, you get pregnant again.
Yes.
And so what's different, if anything, about this pregnancy? Initially, is there anything different? That you could, pinpoint? Because, you've had a couple of miscarriages and now you're pregnant again a year later.
I think the stress level was probably different. That Thanksgiving before, we were trying to sell our house, and we were looking to move into a new house. We were getting ready to build. And then in September, when I found out I was pregnant, it had been maybe a month or so after we'd moved into our new house where we were settled. And I think that took a lot of stress off of my shoulders. The other thing was I was in a better place with my blood sugars. As you know, I'm diabetic. That makes it more difficult, I think, to not only get pregnant, but to sustain the pregnancy. Just because of the physiological factors that elevated blood sugars has on, the whole conception process and carrying the baby.
So you get pregnant this time, and had you had any conversations with your doctor about the miscarriages and what going forward to expect or what to do to sustain this pregnancy?
Actually, I had made an appointment with the doctor to see if there was any fertility treatments that would have been available probably that summer. And the earliest appointment I could get was in September. So that September visit was actually to confirm the pregnancy and not a fertility consult. So it was actually, let's just confirm that there is a pregnancy here and see what we needed to go from there. They confirmed the pregnancy. It was going great. They didn't see any problems with a baby or with me. And so it was just a time of celebration. A time of celebration, and I guess maybe a little bit of concern because I had miscarried. And really there wasn't anything more I could do except pray and just give it to God.
And so you carry the baby to term.
I did.
And nothing unusual happened during the pregnancy.
No, thank God. My blood sugars were great. I did have a little bit of high blood pressure, but the doctor thinks that was, I probably had some high blood pressure before the pregnancy. So that wasn't considered a complication until the very end, until that last little trimester. My blood pressure did start elevating, and they were just watching me, if
Were you on bed rest, or you just were still going about your normal?
At about 35, 36 weeks, they decided that I needed to probably go on, not necessarily bed rest, but where you're confined to the bed. But I did go ahead and stop work and just try to take it easy to try to keep my blood pressures down.
Absolutely. And so the baby was going to be, or would have been delivered in what month?
At about 37 weeks, 37 to 38 weeks. We were hoping for 38 weeks.
Did they have to induce?
No, they didn't induce. We were actually looking to potentially induce at 38 weeks. And I actually had planned to deliver with a specialist, a high-risk specialist in Lafayette. And because they were going to allow me to try a vaginal birth after having a C-section. And the risks with me being diabetic, having the earlier C-section, our team of doctors just felt more comfortable that it would be best if I deliver in that setting if I was going to deliver, vaginally. The 36 weeks and 6 days, I went for my regular appointment, and my blood pressure had started to spike. And while I wasn't really in pain, I just wasn't comfortable physically. I wasn't comfortable just sitting down, standing up, lying down. I was just, not hurting, but just couldn't get comfortable.
Did you just, trump that up to, I'm pregnant, I'm about to deliver, and I'm just uncomfortable in my body?
That's what I figured it was. Absolutely.
We're going to take a break here, but when we come back, we're going to talk about what happened next in the pregnancy. Stay on point for more of Marie's story right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This morning we're talking about, or we're continuing the conversation about miracles. And our guest this morning is Marie Simpson. And before we went to break, Marie, we were talking about right at 37 weeks, you carry the baby to term, but you're very uncomfortable in your body. And so when you go in for your visit, do they make a decision that what's going to happen? Or do you go in labor?
No, I never went into labor. I either fortunately or unfortunately, don't have any idea what labor feels like with either of the pregnancies because I delivered Sarah early as well. But the doctor said, well, your blood pressure's a little high. I don't feel comfortable. Thank God my doctor was very attentive and was looking outside the box, trying to make sure that not only my baby, but that I was safe as well. So I'm very appreciative of that because she could have just sent me home and said, that's normal.
Right.
You're uncomfortable. Put on your big girl panties and just move on with life. And thank God she was
Was there
insistent.
some intuition on her part, or was it just the previous miscarriages?
I'm sure it was intuition on her part. That and the fact that she's such a great doctor. But she said, let's go ahead and go into labor and delivery, that floor, and let's just have you monitored for a little while. And let's see if your blood pressure comes down to, a little bit more comfortable range. So I did, and apparently the pressure did not go down. And so she said, well, let's try a couple of medications that typically bring your blood pressure down, and we'll see what happens then. In hopes that they would be able to send me home and let me stay pregnant for just a little longer. And unfortunately, after I received that medication, my blood pressure spiked in the opposite direction. I want to say it went to well over 200, over 100. Details are a little bit blurry now. But she said, this isn't good, and I don't suspect that it's going to get better. We need to go ahead and deliver this baby. So
what are you thinking in that moment? And what is she telling you about, the increased blood pressure so extremely high?
Well, physiologically, the increased blood pressure, especially in pregnancy, can cause what we call eclampsia. And that's basically seizures.
Right.
And the seizures and the high blood pressure can also damage the kidneys.
And so you're a nurse, and you know a lot of logistics about where you are and what could happen.
Yes.
So are you starting to overthink it at that point?
No, really. I was at peace about going ahead and deliver. I felt like she was making the right decision.
But you weren't prepared to deliver that day, were you?
I was not prepared. Logistically, I was not prepared.
Sure.
Because when she told me this was a little past 11:30 at night, and she was talking about an emergency cesarean section. So that meant that I had to get on the phone with, family and just make sure that my daughter was being taken care of, and she was with her grandparents, and had to make sure my husband came up, and so they did, so that he wouldn't miss the birth.
Sure.
And he got there just in time, and I was excited that I was going to finally get to meet this beautiful little boy that I couldn't imagine I was going to be able to have, and here he is.
And the little boy that you prayed about for so
Yes.
long, and he's finally here. And so they go in and they do an emergency section. And then what happens?
From what I understand, and this is a story that I've been told by several different people because I honestly don't remember these particular details. But they said that the section went really well, that my son, Charlie, was born and was doing great. I think he did have a little bit of maybe some trouble breathing at first, which isn't abnormal. I guess it's abnormal for babies who are born naturally, but...
So in a section, because I had a section too, you're fully awake. So what happened that you didn't remember the birth?
I remember having him, and I remember hearing that he was born, but the medications that they had given me to help lower my blood pressure, I'm pretty sensitive to different medications in general. I can't take pain medications very well. I take maybe half a dose if I'm going to take it, just because it really affects me pretty strongly. And so I think that the medications is probably the biggest culprit for the C-section.
So now everything is very nebulous, very hazy for you. But you know that he was born. You know that you believe that he's okay.
I believed he was okay because they handed him to my husband, who was holding him, and he brought him over so that I could see him. And I remember seeing him wrapped up and my husband holding them. And I think that's probably the last bit of memory I have of that situation. They said that they closed me up and brought me back into the room so that I could recover. And they had thought that everything was going well until they noticed that I was bleeding. And they tried to stop the bleeding, and it just wasn't working. They pulled out all the stops.
So at that point, you had lost consciousness because you had lost so much blood, you think?
That is probably the case. It's possible that they have given me some other medications to try to stop the bleeding, and that made me, not remember. Perhaps it was just a traumatic event, or maybe it's the medications that they gave me next to go back into surgery, because there are certain amnesiac drugs that will, kind of wipe away your memory. So that's a possibility as well.
So when do you remember having a consciousness or an unconsciousness about what is happening to your physical body? Or what's happening in the spiritual realm?
It has, I want to say it has to be between the time that I came back from the operating room, before they took me back into the operating room, while they were trying to stop the bleeding. That I want to say that is when what happened, probably in the spiritual realm, happened.
And so they take you back into the operating room after you've had the C-section because they notice that you're hemorrhaging.
I'm hemorrhaging.
And so you're not really consciously aware.
Right. I can't feel that I'm hemorrhaging. I know that they're very excited. I know that that everyone is rushing around. I know that there is a lot of people working hard to take care of me. But I didn't remember what exactly was happening for them to cause all that busyness. The next thing I know is that I'm in a room with no walls, and that probably doesn't make sense. But the physical, everybody around me sort of phased out, and I didn't see them, I really didn't hear them anymore. It was just me in my hospital gown in the bed. I knew I was in my hospital bed, and the room had literally just transformed into some sort of beautiful place, beautiful, peaceful, calm place. And I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried at all. And I was confident that I was okay. What okay meant, I wasn't sure at that time. I just know that a lot of decisions were being made right then, and I can't really explain or verbalize how I know that decisions were being made, except that I know that I was having a conversation with someone, although I don't remember audibly hearing what they were saying, but that I know that the questions they were asking me, my answers to those questions were being typed out in front of me, as if on a whiteboard. And as I say it sounds bizarre. It sounds kind of crazy. But it was very real to me.
Are you spiritually aware that, do you think that you are transitioning? Do you think that you are leaving your physical body, or you think you're dreaming?
I knew it wasn't a dream. At least it didn't feel like a dream. I didn't feel like I had left my physical body or that I was transitioning necessarily. I knew I was very much at peace. I didn't think that death was a possibility. It didn't seem, as far as spiritually, that there was going to be an end. And I don't know how to explain how I knew that. I just knew that it wasn't. And the questions they asked me...
Do you remember the questions?
I don't.
But you were conscious, or you were aware somewhere that you were being asked questions.
I knew I was being asked questions by someone I couldn't see. I couldn't see anybody. It was as if I was alone in this room. Beautiful colors surrounding me, peace, not a physical room as in there had four walls, but just, it was a room because I couldn't see anything else besides these beautiful colors around me, if that makes sense.
And those colors gave you a sense of peace?
The whole situation, I was at peace. I was not concerned that anything negative was happening. And when I guess I heard the question. I don't remember audibly hearing anything. I just know I was being asked a question, and in my response, it would be typed out in front of me. And so the answer to the first question, again, I don't know what the question was, but it was, God, I trust you to take care of Sarah, my daughter, because she was my first responsibility, per se. The second answer to my question was, God, I trust you to take care of my husband. And again, I don't even think I knew why I was being asked these questions. But the last question I remember, again, it was all joyful, it was all calm and peace. The last question, the answer I gave was, Lord, I trust you to take care of my baby. And in that split second, when I saw the last word being typed out and the punctuation being given, I felt a sense of sadness or grief that I wouldn't be able to see him grow up.
Wow.
And that's what caught me off guard, because before I hadn't considered not being present in the physical world here. But apparently, at that second, I knew that one of the decisions was, will I be here to be able to raise him, or will I go on to some place that I know has to be absolutely wonderful? And in that split second, when I felt that twinge of, oh my goodness, I really want to be able to hold him, I woke up. The room dissipated, the colors dissipated, and people were around me. I could see the doctors and the nurses and my husband at the bedside. And the next thing they told me was that I was bleeding and that they were going to have to take me back into surgery to stop the bleeding. And I vaguely remember her telling me that she may have to do a hysterectomy to stop the bleeding, but they were going to do everything in their power to stop that from happening. So again, I was at peace, and I said, okay, and they took me back to surgery.
Wow. What an incredible story. Stay on point, everybody. We're back with more right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This morning, Marie walks us through the miracle of giving childbirth and how we feel like once we get pregnant and we proceed to giving birth, we just take for granted that all is well. But for whatever reason, you started hemorrhaging and you go to this beautiful, calm place that you really probably don't have the adjectives to describe adequately.
Seriously not.
What that was like. And so when you finally wake up after answering the last question and they tell you you're going to have to go back into surgery, what happens after that?
Well, the surgery apparently went well. I woke up in ICU, which is not what you'd like to happen for someone who's just given birth. ICU people would rather not take care of a postpartum mother. They would much rather, moms be in labor and delivery with their child. But I learned that they did have to do the hysterectomy, which was heartbreaking. But at the same time, given the complications that I had I been cognizant of what was going on, I'm sure that I would have said, okay, let's do the hysterectomy anyway.
And this is really a life-saving measure.
It really was. She saved my life by doing this. Actually, she called in a couple of other of her colleagues to come in to help. And so they, as a team, really did do everything they could to save me.
Mm-hmm. At what point do they tell you that you have had to have a hysterectomy? Because you're still young.
I want to say it was probably the next day because they were trying to allow me to wake up and be able to understand what happened. And the intensivist, the doctor there, he really wanted me to be able to talk to my OBGYN, who actually had to perform the procedure, and let her tell me about it instead of him give me those details. And so regardless, I knew that it was a life-saving measure. And even though I was grieving about the fact that I wouldn't be able to have any more children, before I was prepared to say that, I knew that it's what had to be done in order to save my life. And so I appreciated them making that difficult decision. After that, I had received several units of blood. So those of you that think that your blood may not go to anybody, it is seriously going to people who need it to make it through the next few minutes of life.
Had that blood not been there, that could have definitely changed your outcome.
Absolutely. It definitely would have changed my outcome had the blood not been available. So I'm so thankful for donors and try to donate as much as I can now too. But my blood pressure issues had still not been stabilized. And that's not uncommon for somebody who's been in preeclampsia. Unfortunately, some mothers with preeclampsia may go years with uncontrolled blood pressure after delivery. So I'm thankful that I'm now controlled now, and they were able to control my blood pressure pretty well throughout the rest of the stay. But during those times, I also experienced a strange phenomenon called flash pulmonary edema. And
what is that?
It's basically where your lungs start to fill up with fluid from the inside. They start to swell, and you're essentially drowning, not from fluid that you've taken in through your respiratory system, but from fluid that has come in from the surrounding tissues.
Wow.
And I couldn't breathe. And so thank God, again, somebody noticed what was happening, and they were very quick in their response and were able to save my life yet again.
Wow.
By coming to my rescue and giving me the proper medications to relieve me of that fluid.
And so what does all of this do for your faith? Because you're praying all the time. You're praying, first of all, to be able to conceive after a 14-year span. Then you're praying that you can carry the child to term and that the baby is going to be okay. But now you're faced with, will you even survive the birth?
Right. Well, given that...
Because I'm thinking after the first surgery, where they go in and do the hysterectomy, where you're hemorrhaging, and you come out of that, you feel like, okay, they had to take my uterus, but I'm going to be okay. And then your body starts taking on fluid.
Right. It was discouraging, I would say that. But given the fact that I do have my faith and I had that experience with the strange questions and my answers being typed out in front of me, I still had a sense of peace. I guess I felt confident in that no matter what happened, it was going to be fine. Everything was going to be fine. Kind of like Satan doesn't want you to succeed, but I have God, working in my life.
And how do you come out of that next life-altering and could be challenging situation with the fluid? How do you come out of that?
After they gave me the medications, I bounced back miraculously well. Typically, people who experience that sort of complication often have other complications with their heart. They sometimes end up with congestive heart failure.
Wow.
But they came in and did echocardiograms. I didn't have a single problem with my heart. My ejection fraction was perfect.
Wow.
It just proved to me that no matter what was happening in the physical realm, God still was taking care of me.
When did you know that you had experienced miracle after miracle after miracle? Did you know like instantly? Or did you have to process what had happened?
I think I had to process it. It did not come immediately. I was probably home a good 3 months before I was really able to wrap my brain around what I had experienced. And during those 3 months, I was also being convicted, if you will, of different things that I feel God wasn't pleased with me doing. For instance, maybe watching shows that he wouldn't, that aren't really uplifting, that aren't really good in nature. It was like a strong sense of, this is not of me. This is not what I would like you to spend your time watching. Different things like that.
Just little things. Because, I mean, most people don't ever really even think of anything like that. But you knew it was a conviction.
I felt like it was a different feeling in my spirit. Again, I don't know how to describe it, but it was just an acknowledgement that these things were not what he would have me do. They weren't edifying him, and they were not going to edify me.
Wow. But you had been living your life for Christ.
Yes. I believed I was a Christian. I believe that I was striving to live the Christian life. But as we all know, we can all do better.
Sure.
And I feel like he was pressing upon me different ways that I needed to improve. As if I had already been shown a small glimpse, a teeny tiny glimpse of what is to come in store for us who are in him. And since I was privileged to see that I needed to take a higher stand in what I do with my free time.
Wow. And so did that forever sort of change your convictions and what you would allow in and
Yes.
what you...
Yes, very much so. I can't list every single thing, but
Sure.
I know that there is a sense of things that I wouldn't have thought twice about before. Oh, that's not a big deal.
Right.
It might not be that big of a deal, but it simply isn't edifying to God, and it isn't edifying to me as a person. And so...
And did you just feel like God had just given you another chance to do this thing? And none of us are going to do it perfectly.
Right.
But that you had, there were just at least 3 times where your life was literally hanging in the balance.
You're right. If anything, it gave me, one, a new perspective on there is life after death. After physical death, there is definitely life. And I can't wait to see what's in store. I have absolutely no fear of death. I can't explain that why, as far as to give you concrete examples of why.
But you know in your knower.
I know in my spirit that there is so much to look forward to. And I can't wait to see it. I'm convinced that he didn't let me see any more because I probably would not have come back.
Wow.
I probably wouldn't have chosen to come back. But the other part was, God's given me this son and my daughter and a husband. And those were the 3 people that those questions had to have been about, because that's what my answers were about. So I see a renewed, impression to make sure I take care of those relationships, make sure that I take care of those people that God has put in my life, that he has given me responsibility, and to take pleasure in those relationships and the fact that I've been given another chance to spend time with them, to live life and help them through what the rest of this life is going to look like. Because as you and I all know, COVID has changed everything.
Absolutely.
It can change in a blink of an eye. And yet I still have this privilege of being here with everyone and raising my son and having the joy of looking at them and living
what a
with them.
miracle, and what a miracle he is.
Yes, what a miracle. And even though he is cute and beautiful, and my husband is absolutely wonderful, and I couldn't describe what my daughter means to me, the other fact that God is real and his love for us is so real, it surpasses absolutely every relationship you could ever dream about. That connection with God, with Jesus, his son, who died for us and rose again, that's real. I have never been more convinced that that whole situation is real.
Marie, thank you. Thank you for sharing your miracle with us and your love and your conviction for Jesus Christ with our listeners and viewers. It absolutely is so needed at such a time as this. There are people right now that are going through this life that maybe didn't receive a miracle, that they were believing God for, and maybe wondering, is God really real? And you can testify that he is really real.
Oh, he's so real. I completely understand the concern about those who have maybe not received that miracle that they...
In the way that they thought.
In the way they thought. Perhaps they've lost a loved one. Having, and I don't mean to sound crass when I say this, because grief is real.
Yes.
And grief is devastating, especially when you lose a loved one. But the fact that Jesus is also real, I guarantee that loved one that they may have lost is in such a better place. And really the grief is probably centered around what we are missing out because they're not with us. But we shouldn't grieve for that person who we've lost, because they are experiencing life in a whole new way that is so unimaginably wonderful.
Amazing. Marie, thank you.
Thank you.
Marie Simpson, another miraculous story. Stay on point. We're back after this.